On February 27, 1944, the USS Greyback, one of the most successful submarines in the Pacific Fleet, vanished somewhere in the East China Sea. All 80 crew members were lost. No distress call, no survivors, no wreckage ever found. For 75 years, the Navy insisted they knew where the submarine went down. Japanese records documented the attack. Coordinates were logged. Search expeditions spent millions scanning the sea floor. They found nothing but empty sand and black water. Then a Japanese researcher examining original wartime documents discovered something that investigators had missed for 3/4 of a century. A single digit, mistranslated. One number that shifted the search area by 100 miles. When an advanced underwater drone finally descended to the corrected location 1,400 feet down in the midnight zone, the cameras found the Greyback sitting upright on the ocean floor. But they also captured something that made crew members leave the control room. The men inside hadn't died in the explosion. What the cameras recorded revealed how they actually spent their final moments, and it challenges everything we thought we knew about submarine warfare. The USS Greyback wasn't just another submarine. When it slipped beneath the waves of Pearl Harbor for its 10th war patrol, it was already a legend in the Pacific Fleet. In less than 2 years of combat operations, the Greyback had sunk over 63,000 tons of Japanese shipping. Freighters, tankers, troop transports. The submarine had sent 14 confirmed vessels to the bottom, making it one of the highest scoring boats in the entire Navy. Crews on other submarines talked about the Greyback the way baseball players talk about a team on a winning streak. Everyone wanted to know its secret. The secret was Commander John Moore. At 39 years old, Moore had spent his entire adult life in submarines. He understood the peculiar calculus of undersea warfare, the patience required to stalk a convoy for days, the split-second timing needed to fire torpedoes and dive before escort ships could respond. His crew trusted him completely. In submarine combat, trust is not optional. When you are sealed inside a steel tube 200 feet underwater, the man giving orders is the difference between surfacing and becoming a permanent resident of the ocean floor. The 80 men aboard represented the full spectrum of Navy experience. Some were veterans who had survived multiple patrols. Others were younger sailors on their first or second deployment. What they shared was competence. By 1944, the submarine service had learned brutal lessons about what worked and what got men killed. The crews that remained were good at their jobs. They had to be. On January 28, 1944, the Greyback departed Pearl Harbor bound for the East China Sea. The mission was standard commerce rating: hunt Japanese supply lines, sink anything flying the enemy flag, return home. The patrol area placed the submarine in some of the most dangerous waters in the Pacific, within range of Japanese air bases and heavily trafficked by enemy vessels. But the Greyback had operated in dangerous waters before. Submarine protocol demanded radio silence during patrols. A transmission could reveal position to enemy listeners, so boats went quiet when they left port and stayed quiet until they returned. Families understood this. Weeks would pass without any word, and that silence was normal, expected. The Navy only contacted families when something had gone wrong. The Greyback was scheduled to return by March 7th. The date came and went. No submarine appeared on the horizon. No radio message announced a delayed arrival. On March 30th, the Navy declared USS Greyback overdue and presumed lost. The 80 families received telegrams. The wording was clinical, almost gentle in its bureaucratic detachment. But the message was devastating. Your husband, your son, your father, your brother is gone. We do not know where. We do not know how. We have no body to send home. When a surface ship sinks, wreckage floats. Oil slicks spread across the water. Bodies wash ashore months later on distant beaches. Submarines offer no such closure. They simply vanish, taking their crews into darkness so complete that even the ocean doesn't give them back. The Greyback was gone. The question that would haunt families for 75 years was simple: where? After the war ended, the Navy faced a grim accounting. 52 American submarines had been lost in combat. Thousands of sailors were missing. Families deserved answers, even if those answers were painful. Intelligence officers combed through captured Japanese military records, daily reports from air bases, radio intercepts, attack logs from pilots and ship captains. Somewhere in those documents were the fates of the missing boats. The work was tedious but essential. Every submarine loss needed a cause, a location, a final entry in the official record. For the Greyback, they found what appeared to be definitive evidence. A Japanese naval aviator flying from a base in Okinawa had filed a report on February 27, 1944. He described spotting an American submarine on the surface in the East China Sea. He attacked, dropping a 500-pound bomb. He reported a direct hit. The submarine sank. The pilot had logged coordinates, latitude and longitude, recorded with the precision expected of military documentation. Navy analysts matched the date and location against the Greyback's patrol area. The timeline fit. The position was consistent with where the submarine should have been operating. Case closed. The Greyback had been sunk by aerial attack approximately 100 miles east-southeast of Okinawa. The coordinates were recorded in official histories, passed down through decades of naval documentation, treated as established fact. Except when people went looking, they found nothing. The first serious search expeditions began in the 1970s as diving technology improved. Researchers used the Navy's coordinates, scanned the seafloor with sonar, sent down cameras. The ocean bottom was empty. They expanded the search radius. Still nothing. They checked their equipment, refined their methods, tried again. The result was always the same. By the turn of the century, the Greyback had become one of the enduring mysteries of submarine warfare. The official record said it was there. The ocean said otherwise. Theories multiplied to fill the void. Some speculated the crew had mutinied, sailing the boat to a neutral port and disappearing. Others suggested a Japanese superweapon, something so secret that records had been destroyed. A few invoked the supernatural, noting the area's proximity to the Dragon's Triangle, where ships had reportedly vanished under mysterious circumstances for centuries. The families of the crew lived with this uncertainty. No grave to visit, no definitive account of what happened, just coordinates that led nowhere and questions that never got answered. The problem wasn't the searchers. They were thorough, dedicated, and well-equipped. The problem was the map itself. In 2018, a Japanese systems engineer named Yutaka Iwasaki was pursuing an unusual hobby. He spent his evenings reading original wartime documents from Japanese military archives, examining the actual handwritten kanji rather than relying on translations. He came across the attack report from February 27, 1944, the one that supposedly documented the Greyback's destruction. He compared the coordinates in the original Japanese text to the coordinates in American naval histories. They didn't match. The original report listed the longitude as 128 degrees east. The American translation recorded it as 127 degrees east. One digit, 1 degree of longitude. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, that single degree represents approximately 100 miles. For 75 years, every expedition had been searching in the wrong place. The technology existed to find the Greyback. The determination existed. But the translation error made in 1946 had sent everyone to an empty patch of ocean while the actual wreck sat undisturbed 100 miles away. Iwasaki contacted Tim Taylor, founder of the Lost 52 Project, an organization dedicated to locating every American submarine lost in World War II. Taylor reviewed the evidence. The math was undeniable. They finally knew where to look. The expedition launched in 2019 aboard the research vessel Petrel. This wasn't a casual search operation. The Petrel carried some of the most sophisticated underwater exploration technology on the planet. The primary tools were autonomous underwater vehicles, robotic drones programmed to descend to the seafloor and methodically scan vast areas using side-scan sonar. These machines could operate independently for hours, sweeping back and forth across the ocean bottom, painting detailed acoustic pictures of everything below. When they surfaced, technicians downloaded the data and searched the imagery for anything that looked like a submarine. The depth presented serious challenges. The Greyback, if it was where the corrected coordinates suggested, would be sitting approximately 1,400 feet down. That depth exists in what oceanographers call the midnight zone. No sunlight penetrates that far. The water temperature hovers just above freezing year-round. The pressure exceeds 600 pounds per square inch, enough to crush an unprotected human body instantly. No diver could reach the wreck. Only machines could go that deep and return. The seafloor in the East China Sea complicated matters further. Volcanic formations created confusing sonar returns. Rocky outcroppings could look like debris fields. Ridges cast acoustic shadows that obscured what lay behind them. Every anomaly required closer examination, and most anomalies turned out to be geological features rather than shipwrecks. Days passed. The crew settled into a grinding routine, launch the drone, wait for it to return, download the data, analyze hours of grainy sonar imagery, find nothing, repeat. The psychological weight was substantial. Some crew members half-joked about the submarine curse, the old sailor superstition that certain ships simply refused to be found. Tim Taylor ignored the superstition. He trusted the corrected coordinates. He trusted the math. Then the sonar registered a hard return, a distinct acoustic signature indicating something metallic on the seafloor. The shape was consistent with a submarine hull. The team deployed an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle equipped with cameras, lights, and manipulator arms. Unlike the autonomous drones, this machine was controlled in real time through a fiber optic tether, allowing operators on the surface to see exactly what the cameras saw. The ROV descended into blackness. In the control room, crew members gathered around the monitors. Coffee went cold in forgotten mugs. Nobody spoke. At 1,400 feet, the lights illuminated the seafloor. Mud and silt at first. Then shapes began to emerge from the darkness. The curved line of a pressure hull materialized on screen. The unmistakable silhouette of a conning tower. The Greyback was sitting upright on its keel, proud and intact after 75 years in darkness. Cheers erupted. Someone wiped tears from their eyes. They had found her. But as the ROV pilot maneuvered the camera closer to the hull, the celebration faded. The mood in the control room shifted from triumph to something else entirely. The first thing the cameras revealed was the deck gun. The 4-inch cannon mounted forward of the conning tower was swung out into firing position, its barrel elevated toward the sky. This wasn't the configuration of a submarine preparing to dive. This was the configuration of a submarine preparing to fight. Submarines in World War II were vulnerable on the surface. Their advantage was invisibility, the ability to slip beneath the waves and disappear. Standard protocol when aircraft appeared was to dive immediately, get underwater before the plane could line up an attack run. Every second on the surface was a second of exposure. The Greyback's gun position told a different story. Commander Moore had chosen to engage. Whether he believed the submarine could shoot down the attacker or simply couldn't dive fast enough, he had ordered his men to man the cannon and fight back. It was a decision made in seconds, with consequences that lasted forever. The camera panned upward to the conning tower. What it revealed confirmed the Japanese pilot's report with brutal precision. A massive hole gaped in the aft section of the tower. The metal was peeled back, torn inward by tremendous force. This was the impact point of a 500-pound bomb, the exact weapon the pilot had reported dropping. The explosion would have been catastrophic for anyone on the bridge. The tower itself, the elevated platform from which the captain directed surface operations, had been essentially destroyed. But the most significant discovery wasn't the obvious damage, it was something much smaller. Something the original investigators in 1946 could never have seen from translated documents. The outer hatch was open, not blown open by the explosion, not torn from its hinges. The hatch that led from the bridge down into the submarine's interior was simply open, as if someone had been climbing through when time ran out. The implications were immediate and terrible. If the hatch was open, men were still on the bridge when the bomb hit, or they were on the ladder, scrambling to get below, caught between the sky and the safety of the pressure hull. The explosion would have killed anyone topside instantly. But the open hatch meant the blast also had a direct path into the submarine itself. The cameras continued their examination. The dive planes, the horizontal fins that control a submarine's angle of descent, were set to dive position. The engines had been engaged. The Greyback was trying to go down when the bomb struck. This configuration painted a nightmare scenario. The submarine was diving, engines pushing it downward, when the bomb tore open the conning tower and left the hatch compromised. Water would have poured into the control room immediately, not a slow leak that pumps could manage. A torrent flooding the compartment where the men who actually steered the boat were stationed. The ROV pilot guided the camera along the length of the hull, documenting everything. Approximately 50 yards from the main wreckage, the sonar had detected a debris field. Scattered metal, pieces of decking, fragments that had separated from the submarine during its descent or from a secondary attack. The evidence suggested the Japanese pilot hadn't simply dropped his bomb and departed. He had circled back, strafing runs with machine guns, possibly a second bomb. The double tap, military doctrine for ensuring a target was truly neutralized. The Greyback hadn't sunk in the conventional sense. A submarine taking on water gradually settles lower, lists to one side, gives the crew time to react. The men of the Greyback had no time. With the conning tower destroyed, the hatch open, and the dive planes pushing the boat downward, the submarine would have plummeted toward the bottom, falling, not sinking. A 1,400-foot drop into permanent darkness. And inside the hull, 80 men experienced every moment of it. The pressure hull of a submarine is designed to be a sealed environment. Thick steel walls, reinforced hatches, watertight compartments. When a submarine sinks intact, that same engineering that protects the crew during operation creates something else entirely. A capsule, a time vault, a place where the normal processes of decay operate under different rules. At 1,400 feet, the water temperature hovers near freezing. No sunlight reaches that depth. Oxygen levels are minimal. The large scavengers that consume shipwreck remains in shallower waters. The sharks and crabs and bottom feeders cannot easily access a sealed interior. What goes down stays down, preserved in ways that the surface world rarely experiences. When the ROV cameras peered through the breaches in the Greyback's hull, the crew in the control room above expected to see wreckage, twisted metal, scattered debris, the chaos of a violent death. What they found instead was order. The men of the Greyback were at their stations. In the engine room, remains were positioned near the diesel engines. In the torpedo room, near the tubes. In the control room, near the instruments that steered the submarine and monitored its systems. 75 years after the attack, the crew was still where their duties required them to be. The sight was so unexpected, so fundamentally different from what anyone had prepared for, that several team members left the control room. They simply couldn't watch anymore. In the chaos of a sinking ship, human instinct drives people toward escape. Passengers on torpedoed vessels claw toward hatches, fight for life jackets, climb over each other to reach lifeboats. The primal urge to survive overrides almost everything else. Submarines don't allow that option. In a submarine, every man has a job that keeps the boat alive. The machinist managing engine pressure, the electrician monitoring battery levels, the plainsman controlling depth. If anyone abandons their post, the boat dies faster. Everyone dies faster. The only chance of survival, however slim, depends on every crew member doing exactly what they were trained to do until the very last moment. The men of the Greyback understood this, even as water flooded the compartments, even as the lights failed and emergency systems flickered to red, even as the hull groaned under increasing pressure and the boat spiraled downward into darkness. They stayed. The cold water had preserved more than just positions. Personal effects remained visible, boots still laced, belts with tools still attached, headphones resting near the sonar station where an operator had been listening for threats until listening no longer mattered. The deep ocean had created a Pompeii of the Pacific, a snapshot of the final moments frozen in place for 3/4 of a century. Tim Taylor made the decision immediately. Do not enter, do not touch. The ROV would film from outside the breaches, document what could be seen, but would not penetrate further into the wreck. There is a line between historical investigation and desecration, and Taylor refused to cross it. The footage did answer questions that had haunted families for decades. Conspiracy theories that had flourished in the absence of evidence dissolved in the presence of it. The friendly fire theory, the fear that an American aircraft had accidentally bombed the Greyback, was disproven by the damage patterns. The angle and characteristics of the destruction matched Japanese ordnance, not American. The secret cargo theory whispers that the Greyback had been carrying gold or classified materials that weighted it down, was dismissed by the interior footage. No hidden crates, no mysterious payload, just the standard equipment of a fleet submarine and the men who operated it. The truth was simpler than the conspiracies. 80 sailors on a combat patrol encountered a Japanese bomber at the worst possible moment. They fought back. They lost. They went down doing their jobs. In the Navy, submariners lost at sea are said to be on eternal patrol. It's a poetic phrase, a way of honoring the missing without acknowledging the permanence of their absence. Seeing the Greyback, seeing the crew still at their stations, the phrase stops being poetry. It becomes literal. For 75 years, the families of the Greyback's crew existed in a particular kind of limbo. They knew their men were gone. The Navy had told them that much in 1944. But knowing someone is dead and knowing where they rest are different things. One allows grief. The other allows closure. Children grew up without fathers, became parents themselves, then grandparents, all while the question remained unanswered. Where is he? Some family members spent decades writing letters to the Navy, requesting information, hoping that new evidence might surface. Others stopped asking, finding it easier to accept uncertainty than to keep reopening the wound. The discovery of the Greyback gave them something they had stopped expecting: a location, a final resting place, coordinates that actually meant something. Under international maritime law and United States military regulations, the Greyback is classified as a war grave. The designation carries legal weight. Salvage operations are prohibited. Artifact removal is forbidden. The site cannot be disturbed for commercial purposes or casual exploration. The 80 men aboard are considered buried at sea, and their tomb is protected accordingly. The crew of the Petrel understood this. After completing their documentation of the wreck, they held a ceremony on the deck of the research vessel. The names of all 80 sailors were read aloud. A bell was rung once for each man. A wreath was lowered into the water above the site, a small circle of color floating on the surface of an indifferent gray ocean. Tim Taylor watched the wreath drift and offered a simple statement: "We brought them home." Not literally. The bodies remain where they fell, 1,400 feet down in permanent darkness. They will stay there, but the families now have something they lacked before: certainty, a place on the map that means something, the knowledge that their sailors didn't vanish into conspiracy theories or supernatural explanations. They died in combat, serving their country, and their resting place is known. The question of whether remains should be physically recovered divides families of the lost. Some want their ancestors brought back to American soil, buried in cemeteries where descendants can visit. Others believe the ocean is the appropriate final resting place for sailors, that disturbing the site would violate the peace of the dead. There is no consensus, and likely never will be. The Greyback discovery established a precedent for the Lost 52 project. Document everything, honor the crew, leave the wreck undisturbed. But the mission continues. 52 American submarines were lost in World War II. The Greyback was one. 41 others remain missing, their locations uncertain or entirely unknown. If a single translation error hid the Greyback for 75 years, how many other wrecks are sitting in darkness, obscured by clerical mistake? Archives in Washington, Tokyo, London, and Moscow contain millions of pages of wartime documents. Many have never been digitized, some have never been translated. Each page represents a potential correction, a possible discovery, another family's closure waiting to be found. For the relatives of those 41 missing submarines, the war hasn't ended. The waiting continues. Somewhere in the paperwork, their answers may still exist. The Greyback sits at 1,400 feet, resting on the seafloor it reached on February 27, 1944. The submarine that once terrorized Japanese shipping lanes has become something else entirely. An artificial reef. Crabs crawl across the torpedo tubes. Anemones grow on the periscope housing. Small fish dart through spaces where sailors once walked. The ocean has accepted the Greyback into itself, transforming a weapon of war into a foundation for new life. Inside, 80 men remain at their stations. They will never surface. They will never receive the order to come home. The eternal patrol continues in darkness and silence, uninterrupted by the decades passing above. But they are no longer lost. The mystery of the Greyback was never truly a mystery. The answer existed from the beginning, written in a Japanese pilot's report. Waiting for someone to read it correctly. 75 years of searching, millions of dollars spent, countless hours of frustration and false hope, all because of a single digit translated wrong. It makes you wonder what else is out there. What other ships sit in darkness, hidden not by the ocean's depth, but by human error? What other families are waiting for answers that already exist somewhere in a forgotten file? The ocean is vast, but it is not infinite, and for those still missing, the search continues.